next speaker is Joshua Wickerham. He's the Chief Advisor of the Ethnobotanical Stewardship Council, which has just launched here at the Reform Conference this week. And it's a nonprofit devoted to assuring the safety and sustainability of traditional medicinal plants and bringing benefits to communities who work with them. Joshua just returned from a 45-day research trip in Peru, conducting initial stakeholder engagement as part of the Ethnobotanical Stewardship Council's Ayahuasca Dialogues. He has a very distinguished background as a policy and outreach advisor to the ISEAL Alliance, which is the Global Association of Sustainability Standards. And he works for and advises executives of leading standards like the Rainforest Alliance, the Forest Stewardship Council, Fair Trade, and other organizations like that. He's lived most of the last decade in China and has now joined us here all the way from Thailand, where he now resides. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you so much, Jag. Jag Davies has been an enthusiastic supporter of this work since we first discussed it at Psychedemia at UPenn a year ago. And I'm thankful to a lot of people, Jim Fadiman, Rick Doblin, Via Labate, some of the luminaries in the ayahuasca world, Dennis McKenna. And this is really my first time talking about this publicly. It's a conversation that's been going on for over a year now. And I have some dual challenges and some big opportunities to share. The challenge is that traditional cultures' knowledge of medicinal plants are under threat, and that we don't have a lot of time to deal with this. And another challenge is this is a very tricky topic, and I don't want to geek out on you, because I geek out on this standards topic too. And I want to get it across in a way that makes sense. And people can come up to me afterward and geek out if they want to. And I want to talk about the opportunities that we have for improving cross-cultural dialogue, for improving the sustainability and safety of traditional plants and the people who use them, improving the environment, improving lives. I want to talk also about different ways that people see the world. I grew up in the forests of the Midwest, in close relation with plants, and I was very comfortable there. But for the last 15 years, I've been traveling around the world, living a fairly urban lifestyle. And I know now enough of the game to know how it works. I mean, it's a long time coming from my initial upbringing of a mile away from the biggest town of 150 people. But as one travels, one sees that the world is quite small. And that cultures are, one can understand different cultures, and there are ways of working with different cultures and empowering them. And I've been researching different models of how to empower communities, how to empower ourselves, preserve individual liberties, etc. And there are so when people talk about sustainability, they often have this sort of model of the world, like, oh, there's some birds, and there's some trees, and there's some windmills, and we're all living a nice, urban, clean existence. But the world is much messier than that, and a biodiverse world does not really look like that picture. And from the perspective of maybe the rest of the species on the planet or the planet itself, it's, what are people doing? And why are people not doing more to save the planet? In the last 6 or 7 years that I've been working with the major sustainability standards, international voluntary sustainability standards like Fair Trade and Organic and the Forest Stewardship Council, I've come to see the world sort of like this. This is a map of all the forests that are certified by the Forest Stewardship Council. It's about 15% of the world's forests. So when you can live an urban existence and buy a Forest Stewardship Council certified product, and you know that the people who cut the wood have enough money to send their kids to school, biodiversity is preserved, their societies are better intact, and this is a multi-stakeholder governance system. FSC is sort of like the UN of the forest world. Or another standard is like the Marine Stewardship Council. They certify close to 20% of the world's fresh-caught fish. Or probably recognize this symbol, the Fair Trade logo. So when you buy a Fair Trade product, you know that the people who made the food, or grew the food, or made the product have enough money to send their kids to school. They have basic health care. They're improving their lives. And when you look at these systems, you can begin to see the world in this way. kind of like a partnership model where we're all working hand in hand. But when we're looking at traditional models, or like globalization as it is right now, these markets obscure safety hazards when it comes to traditional medicines, especially ayahuasca, and they mask unsustainable practices. So when you buy a product and you don't know how it was made, you don't know how it's impacting the rest of the planet. So, as Jag noted, I've been working with these major sustainability standards and advising them over the years, mostly on China. And when I talk about sustainability standards, I usually give a talk in Mandarin. And I ask them, so, what do you think about iboga, which is a root grown in Gabon and other parts of Africa that's under threat? Or what do you think about peyote in Mexico, which is also under threat? Or what do you think about ayahuasca? And the Brazilian leader of one of these standards said, I don't think we're going to do anything on ayahuasca. And some of the other standards said, well, what is ayahuasca? And so for you, those of you wondering what ayahuasca is, it's a traditional medicinal plant preparation from the Amazon. It's a vine. It's a picture of the vine. It's been used for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and it's usually taken at night in a ceremonial context. And so I was hearing things in the community about what Mark Kleiman might call failures of voluntary action, where ayahuasca is legal in Peru. It's enshrined as intangible national heritage. It's protected by law, but visitors are going to Peru, and there's so little regulation that there are all sorts of problems popping up. People's trust has been violated, their bodies have been violated, and there's very little differentiation of sustainable practices from unsustainable practices. So I used some of my frequent flyer miles and went to Peru for 45 days in July and August, looking at sites from the peaks of the Andes down to the teeming swamps of the Amazon. And I discovered that these sites are not that hard to get to. People have said, well, how can you do certification of these sites? They're hours away. You do have to get in boats. Sometimes the moto taxis tip over and you get covered in mud. But the best of these sites, I discovered, are like beacons of consciousness, higher consciousness in the Amazon. They're bulwarks against unsustainable development, against mining, against oil exploitation, against deforestation. And I went to places where, like this reforestation project, where they're planting millions of ayahuasca vines. And the tradition of ayahuasca use had all but died out in this community. And now they're building a ceremonial maloca. They're beginning to welcome tourists. And they're doing it in a sustainable way. On the bottom left, there's a picture of some plants growing at a permaculture site in the Amazon. And the Amazon, before it was colonized first by the Incas and then by the Spanish, was home to millions of people living in harmony with the forest, growing crops in mound gardens, and living sustainably. And you're seeing these permaculture projects pop up, and you talk to the farmers, and they're changing their practices too. They're no longer slashing and burning. They're rejuvenating the soil. So it's really exciting. But there's there's good practices, and then there's a whole range of practices. So I came away from this feeling even more confident that I can apply and work with the community to apply some of the learning of the sustainability standards community to what's happening with ayahuasca. So it's with great pleasure that we announce today the formation of the Ethnobotanical Stewardship Council. And our vision is a world where people have safe access to traditional plant materials and knowledge, while knowing that the use of these plants is helping to protect the planet and improve people's lives. And our strategy and our theory of change is that we believe that the best way to encourage people to work safely and sustainably with traditional plants is for their good work to be recognized and rewarded. And we're working with ICEERs in Europe, MAPS in the United States, PRISM in Australia, as they're kind of our incubators, and they're also our fiscal sponsors, so people can make tax-deductible donations and to these organizations while we're forming our own nonprofit entity. We have an amazing website up where people can make donations, they can suggest sites that we should investigate, good practices, bad practices, and our flagship project is the Ayahuasca Dialogues because there's so much happening. There are tens or hundreds of thousands of tourists going to the Amazon, to Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, Brazil, taking ayahuasca. And so there's a great chance to improve the sustainability and safety of ayahuasca and then apply this model to other traditional plants. And we're using a multi-stakeholder approach to set consensus, build consensus on what safety and sustainability means. And a multi-stakeholder approach means anyone who could be impacted by this consensus or could impact it is proactively reached out to. We would reach out to farmers, experts, government officials, indigenous, retailers, so they can all feed in. And this is a multi-year process, but for the time being, anyway, at the end of this process, what we hope to have is 3 main areas where the ESC can assure users of the standard. The first is the sustainable cultivation of traditional plants. The second is safe practices around their use. With regards to ayahuasca, this is basic first aid and emergency preparedness. It's knowing that you're not going to be violated by the shaman. It's knowing that you're getting the medicine that they say they're giving to you. The third area is around the sustainability of the centers themselves, applying ecotourism concepts to know that when you visit the center, the money you spend, the presence that you have, is having a net positive impact on the ecology and the people. And we aim to recognize this good behavior through 2 claims. One is an on-product claim, so if you buy ayahuasca or you buy a traditional plant, you would see the ESC logo on it. And the second claim is a site claim. So if you went to an ayahuasca retreat center, you would see a star rating. And I'm not going to go into the details of this, but we want the star rating to be both accessible and rigorous. So no one should be excluded if they are in alignment with the principles and the consensus that we developed through the Ayahuasca Dialogues. But reaching a 5-star level should be hard. Having a 1-star rating where you're safe and you have basic sustainability thinking in mind should be fairly easy, but rigorous. So the effect should be a differentiation of the market, so you can know which sites are safe and sustainable. And for the next 2 months, we're doing a crowdsourcing campaign to do our first 6-month study on ayahuasca. 60% of the budget will be mapping and engaging with stakeholders in Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, and Brazil, and hiring local researchers, having overall research management of the project. Administration of the ESC is less than 15%, which is good for a nonprofit. It's keeping the books. Trust me, when Rick Doblin appoints a fiscal manager to look over your books, you're going to do it in an accountable, responsible way. Spend the money the way you say you're going to. We're spending 10% of the money on the website and communications, social media, updating people. And then 15% of this crowdsourcing budget will be put to launching a report, a professional report at a major conference that we can use to reach out to environmental organizations, political organizations, to really get bigger funding to expand the ESC. Make the case that this can be done and should be done. And we have a goal of raising $118,000, and we're already halfway there. So we have ambitious goals, but I think they're reachable. So please tell your friends about this and visit our website and put it on your taxes. So in conclusion, I want to say that the future of psychedelics, the future of traditional plants, I think is going to be more transparent, more safe, more sustainable, and it'll have knock-on effects, positive sustainability impacts. And it's a pleasure. Thank you so much.